Hello and welcome to the Astro Garden, a place for astrologers to chat all things astro. I'm your host Janessa of By Jove Astrology. Thanks for tuning in. All right, welcome to the next episode of the Astro Garden. Today I have Fionn here with me. Actually, I probably should have asked you how to best pronounce your name. Is that right, Fionn?
That's a good attempt. It's Fionn. So it's kind of like the end of onion. When I was over in Norwalk, I was basically just giving people the pronunciation guide on Twitter before I went, saying it's like the end of onion. It's not Fionn, it's not Fionn, it's not Fiona. And that really helped. People had seen that tweet and I was ready.
Nice. Well, Fionn, is that better?
Yep.
I'm getting closer. Fionn. Okay. Well, I have Fionn here with me today. I am super excited to get to know you better. This is our first, interaction outside of social media, so it's really great to have you here today, Fionn.
Yeah, it's good to put a face to the username.
Yeah, totally. So do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to get started?
Yeah, so well, first and foremost, I'm an astrologer based in Ireland. I'm also a stand-up comedian. I make kind of theater stuff, and we can get into that a little bit later on because I made a whole show about the myth of Chiron one time, and that was a thing I did. So yeah, I like to merge my hyperfixations into one thing. Very mutable, but yeah, that's basically my thing.
Nice. Yeah, I'd be remiss, I guess, if I didn't address the recent April Fool's Day joke that you pulled on everyone on Twitter.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, people were mad.
Yeah. So for those who aren't on Twitter, he went ahead and made some tweet about being able to get the copy of the 36 Faces, the highly anticipated book from our second edition from Austin Coppock, which is, very rare at this point in time. It's like out of print. You can get it on eBay for like $2,000 or something crazy. But you had me like in my bed at 6 a.m. in the dark, scrambling to like figure out how I was going to order this book. But that is not the case.
Yeah, so that was the most niche astrology Twitter April Fool's joke I could have done, is just say, hey, this book that's been out of print for 10 years that the author keeps teasing every couple of months. Yeah, it'll be out soon. It's just in the editing phase. Let's just say that's coming out. Thought that'd be innocuous. It worked.
It did.
So many people went to his website and were wondering, hey, I don't see it. Can you send me a link? And I just said, yeah, go to Austin's TikTok. It's on there. Because I just love the idea that Austin Coppock has a TikTok.
Yeah, that was the cherry on top for sure. Yeah, and the timing could not have been better. I mean, his most recent announcement was that it would happen in Q1 of 2024, and it was literally the first day of Q2. So at this point, it was like, okay, yes, we have missed the last goalpost. So it was like very realistic that it would have been announced that day or something. And
yeah. I was actually reading Susan Chang's book on the decans called 36 Secrets, which is like the tarot accompaniment to 36 Faces. And in the introduction to that book, she says, oh yeah, 36 Faces will be out later this year in 2021.
Oh, funny. Yeah. Yeah, it just keeps getting pushed back.
Yeah. I never want to see it released. I just want it to keep going. It's always something to look forward to.
Right? I know. I have actually put off like buying a Decan book because I was like, is it coming? Is it coming? I don't, but at this point, I think I need to move on. No offense. I'll buy it when it comes out, but yeah. Well, let's get into a little bit of your background. If you would feel like sharing your journey to becoming an astrologer.
Yeah, where do I start? It's a kind of convoluted story. I guess my background was I grew up with a very new agey parent, and because of that, I kind of railed against everything that was remotely spiritual or new age. And I'm Irish, so I went to a Catholic primary school and was like, "Oh, actually, this is bad.
Yeah.
This isn't great," and kind of just became very atheist, very anti-spiritual, and that was fine. Like living without any of that is, perfectly grand, and you can do that. But then, yeah, I guess right around the time I was having my second Jupiter return, I started getting into tarot. I started getting into chaos magic, and fell down all these really weird rabbit holes. And I'm not really sure where that started. It might have been a very intellectual researching of psychedelics. Mostly it's just books and books about them and very little actual experiences, but those were, yeah, the entryways into finding astrology. And astrology was always like the number one thing that seemed far too woo to ever get into. And I was like, I promised myself I'll never do that. And then I did. And then towards the end of 2020, after some major life stuff, really needed to make sense of that year, and then got into astrology. It's just on like that kind of personality psychological basis. Then found Chris Brennan, and then found all these timing techniques that were really quite astounding. And especially stuff like having a major life event on an eclipse and noticing that, like an eclipse cycle, that one very important thing happened the first eclipse, and then it came to its highest peak and its finishing. I won't get into it because it's a little bit dark, but yeah, eclipses were pretty much what convinced me of the validity of astrology. That was very rambly, but yeah, that's basically how I got there.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I had such an opposite experience growing up. I was raised extremely Catholic, so like the woo stuff was not really part of it. But yeah, I guess coming to it as an adult, it was interesting, like trying to uh find the spirituality again after having kind of rejected it for a lot of years, like never being totally atheist, but um yeah, it was definitely very foreign, I guess, to a very foreign concept growing up, or something that I was very afraid of. Definitely. And that's so interesting too, what you said about astrology to you feeling like the most woo, because I think for me, being like someone who is somewhat like, I feel like I am very creative or non-linear, but also very analytical. And so for me, astrology had like the data, and that was kind of what was the thing that allowed me to allow myself to get into the woo stuff was astrology. So it's kind of like a little bit backwards.
For sure. Yeah, now that I've studied astrology, it's the most grounded form of woo I've come across, because it's based on something empirical, and it's based on observation. Did this happen when these planets aligned, or when this timing technique said it would, or did it not? And yeah, but there's lots of different kinds of astrologies that you can get a little bit more mystic with, but for the most part, it's fairly grounded. It's not like tarot or scrying where you're really getting into chaotic spaces to make any form of divination.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, I think that's a really key point that I share, the feeling on, like, with it being grounded in what we can observe, like literally in happenings that happen to us, but also like in the sky. And that brings me to a good next point about our shared education with nightlight astrology, kind of like grounding us in that, the Hellenistic techniques where it is very tied into observation. So yeah, I studied through nightlight. I did year one, and now I'm in year two. and Fionn, you've participated in year one.
Yeah, I did year one. I had done Chris Brennan's course before and found, oh, I actually have come across a lot of these concepts before, but I feel Adam's courses are the best in terms of how much information is packed in. So yeah, if you're a beginner astrology student, I would say that's the best course you could possibly do.
Mm-hmm.
Next to Austin Topics, which is really hard to get into.
Yeah.
Because there is such a waiting list.
Yeah. Have you done that one too?
Yeah, I did year one of that. And I actually met Austin when I was in Norwalk, and he was like, oh yeah, I put that curriculum together years ago. Could you tell me what each of the modules are again? And I had such a blank, and I was like, I am embarrassing myself in front of the king.
That's pretty cool. You got to meet him though. That's
Yeah,
hilarious. He doesn't even remember that they were.
yeah. It's like you're asking me to remember and you can't.
Yeah. I
You're
don't
putting
think
me
he
on the
should
spot?
be. Yeah, you
Yeah,
should
no,
not feel
he's
any
super nice.
embarrassment if he's not.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I was expecting him to be kind of intimidating, but like he is so approachable.
That's really cool. Yeah, he seems like he would be very down to earth. Yeah. It's so interesting to when you finally get to meet people, like you were saying at the beginning of this, it's like you study with people or you meet people online and you rarely get like the one-on-one or the face-to-face. So that's pretty cool that you were able to go all the way to Norwalk to do that.
Yeah, that was such a leap. And yeah, so I went all the way over to Norwalk from Ireland because I found a ridiculously cheap flight, and that was the only reason why I went over. But I was also like, yeah, I found astrology because I was chronically ill for a number of years, and I was like, I don't know if I'll ever be well enough to go over and do something as mad as this again. Let's just do it.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
that's awesome.
so yeah, making like a very wild choice to get a 16-hour flight over to an astrology conference and having to explain to the TSA where I was going.
Oh, sure. Yeah, with the visa and passport situation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
they were very confused.
yeah. That's a hilarious conversation to envision. That's it's,
Yeah, so they were just mostly confused by conference. They were like, wait, are you speaking at this? Is this a professional thing? They just couldn't understand astrology and conference being in the same sentence. They're like,
Mhm.
so you're not an astronomer? Like, yeah,
Oh,
that
sure.
was
And
like
then
2 hours.
yeah, was it a few hours?
Yeah, so it's just because they were confused. If anything confusing comes up when you're going through, they just put you into the back room and you have to wait. And it was a 2-minute conversation to get out.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. And uh they do the customs in Dublin before you fly off. So yeah, so you're not being sent back from America to Ireland. So it's not too bad.
Yeah. Well, that's good that it was on the front end at least.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So then did you meet a lot of people there? Were you able to network a bit?
Yeah, astrology Twitter was really handy because I knew so many people there before. I think it would have been difficult had I not known people going already.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, have you ever been to Norwalk or any of the conferences?
No, not yet. I would like to someday, but not yet.
Yeah, so conferences like that, it's kind of even Chris Brennan asked me after how I got on, and he was saying, yeah, sometimes it can be hard to get in with groups or like in that weird lobby in that hotel that kind of looks like a prison. Anyone who's been to Norwalk will know. But yeah, for the most part, people were really lovely. And it was just weird that that was the first time I ever got to talk to people about astrology in person.
Mm.
Oh, actually, no, that's not true. I met my first Irish astrologer friend a month before,
Oh,
after,
nice.
like, 2.5 years of studying at that point, and that was so wild.
Yeah. Tell me, how did you meet them?
Um, we met through Instagram, and we did a reading swap. They gave me crystals, I gave them a reading, and that was the first time that they had discovered Hellenistic astrology, so apparently I changed the way they viewed their chart for a while,
Oh,
and that's
interesting.
the lovely thing about getting, uh, readings in different schools of astrology is it really cracks your mind open and goes, "Okay, there's different ways of viewing your chart."
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a similar situation with a person I met locally, a friend of a friend who does she does more modern style readings, and we haven't done a reading swap yet, but I'm hoping to soon because I think we have very different places we're coming from, but it's so
Yeah.
cool to get those different perspectives.
Yeah, and that's what I like about being open-minded about different branches of astrology is I do like how thorough and technical Hellenistic and all the traditional stuff is, but there's something really creative and empowering about the modern forms of astrology. The first course I did was evolutionary astrology with Sabrina Monarch, and that's yeah, it's very far away from what I practice technically now, but I'm really glad I had that uh, grounding because I think I would have become a bit of a trad chad had I only studied Hellenistic. Uh, because there's so many modern techniques I love using now that I might have been too snobby to approach had I not.
Sure. What are some of those techniques? I'm
Um,
not
I
familiar.
love asteroids, or stuff, or other stuff like uh, solar arcs or midpoints or stuff like that, that I might have closed my mind to had I not had the evolutionary background first.
Nice. Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm coming at it from starting with traditional, but also wanting to be open-minded to the stuff outside of that. So I'm curious. I think my next course might be something very different from what I've done so far, just to try to diversify.
Mm.
But yeah. Yeah, her courses look really interesting. I love I haven't I'm not super familiar with her work, but what I have heard a little bit about the stuff she does with Pluto is really interesting to me. So yeah, she's definitely someone I've been looking at learning from in the future.
Yeah, her courses are really cool, and it's kind of nice that there are these weekly meetings that you really get to know people and get to know their charts and their stories, and there's a lot of personal storytelling. And I think any course that has, yeah, the ability to put the person to the chart and
Mhm.
really get to hear their story and what they've been through and how the placements have manifested. Yeah, it's just such a good thing to get intimate with when you're learning first.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, courses too have been really key for me with like developing like relationships with other astrologers and like meeting people and um you know they can be really large, but usually there's some component where you can connect with the people involved or like other students, um and that has been really key. I've met a really nice group of girls from from Nightlight Astrology actually, um, and that has helped so much. It can be kind of lonely as an astrologer, like you said, you had been studying for 2.5 years and never talked to someone in person about astrology before, and
Yeah.
it's pretty cool that with the internet now we can find other people to talk with about it. But
And did you have anybody in person, or do you have anybody in person who you can chat to about, or is it all on astrology Twitter?
it's mostly on astrology Twitter and like the group chats. There's a handful. I am a member at a yoga studio nearby, and it's luckily for me not like it's more of like a spiritual yoga studio versus like the really hardcore like workout ones. So the owner there is pretty into astrology, so she'll like to chat about it like, on occasion. And now this friend of a friend that I met she's a practicing astrologer, so that's pretty cool to have met a real life friend who wants to talk about this nerdy stuff with me all the time. But yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the most important parts of learning is finding community and finding somebody to speak the language with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
bouncing ideas and sorry, go ahead.
no, sorry, go on.
Oh, just sharing ideas or asking questions and like, kind of validating what you've learned or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, or it's just being able to say, "Hey, do you notice you have this in your chart?" Because the first astrologer friend I made here, one of the first conversations we had, I said, "Yeah, I'm making a show about Chiron, but I don't really have the asteroid anywhere prominent in my chart." And they just said, "Yeah, like you have it right training your midheaven, like exactly within seconds." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, right. I hadn't noticed that."
Yeah, getting that perspective. And it can be hard when you're looking at your own chart to see those things, but like having that outside perspective of yourself reflected back to you is really cool.
Yeah, like even just things you would have missed or uh there's often stuff, even speaking to clients that we take for granted in our own chart
Hmm.
or uh or stuff we take for granted about ourselves. I'll even suggest something to a client and they'll say, "No, that's not me." And then they go on to describe exactly the thing I said to them.
Totally.
I once asked a client who had some moon in the third house stuff going on. And I asked them, did they have any connections to goddess imagery? And they said, no, that's not really a thing. And then went on to say they loved the Virgin Mary as a child and really like kind of pedestal the figure they had. And I was like, huh, right.
Yeah. Were you able to help them see that connection, or did you just kind of let it simmer?
Um, we were getting into it, so I didn't really go back to it. But I
Sure.
was like, huh, yeah, it doesn't need to be pointed out. It's just interesting how we even forget about these details.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be so easy to dismiss them or, yeah, overlook.
Yeah. Was there anything in your own chart that you had overlooked for a long time that really makes sense now?
Yeah. I think when I was first learning, I think I'm a Pisces rising, so I've had a big focus on Jupiter as my, ascendant ruler. But then I have Saturn in the 10th in Sag, and that's, an
Mm,
angular Saturn. So I think when
yeah,
I started putting those pieces together, it's like, oh, okay, like, there's like the obvious stuff like around a Saturn return that, really spoke to it. But then I think more recently it's come to mind of like, oh, that's why I feel like I always have to be overachieving at work, or I don't know, it's just like big aha moments, even though it should be very obvious.
yeah. So around your Saturn return, were you just taking on a lot of responsibility in work, or was
Yeah,
it a lot of weight being put upon you? Or was it a little bit of both?
it was both. So uh, I, g- I got pregnant and had a baby. I got married, and at the same time, I was like working at this nonprofit that was really high stress, and I was feeling like underpaid, under recognized, and really like worked really hard to like negotiate a raise, negotiate a title change to kind of stand up for myself. But it was also extremely stressful. I like gave myself shingles with the stress. So yeah, it was a lot of pressure um, that was in the job, but also like on myself that I put on myself, and also negotiating becoming a parent. with the job. So it was good. There were good things that happened, but it was also like, oh, okay. And now lately, I think realizing with that Saturn there that like I don't have to take that so seriously, or that's been a really big like breakthrough for me is like, oh, like jobs are important. We need money, but like is it really that important? I don't know. So,
Yeah, that's a good Saturn return evaluation of, yeah, understanding where your priorities are.
mhm.
And, uh, can I ask, did you have your baby during your Saturn return?
Yes. Yep.
That's a conversation I've been seeing on Twitter a lot of, uh, people asking, "Oh, how many of you were your parents' Saturn return?"
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, then you're sharing all these cycles with your kid throughout the next, like, 30, 60 years.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, my parents and my grandparents have that together where they're each other's Saturn returns.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think of my grandmother's Saturn return, um, yeah, actually I am. I think I was her 2nd.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, that sorry, I just caught that there.
Yeah.
But, yeah, because I was wondering, I wasn't, a Saturn return for either of my parents. I was a Mars return for my mother, and, I think she has Mars in the 5th. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
um, yeah, so having a child who became, yeah, who went on to have Mars and Libra in the 1st.
Okay, interesting. So I'm curious then, what is the relationship like between your parents and grandparents? Like, was that a struggle then with the Saturn return?
Um, I wonder, was it? Um, yeah, I think they were having, issues around my mother's Saturn return, and
Mhm.
then, uh yeah, but that's good now. I'm wondering, yeah, actually, my mother has the same Saturn return as her father, and he passed away during her 2nd
Mhm.
Saturn return.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's these very clear cycles of, yeah, Saturn relating to death and the loss of a parent, and Saturn sometimes relating to the father.
Mhm.
And I've seen, some people pass away during their Saturn return, and yeah, maybe I'm bringing, this to a very dark place, but yeah, that's what comes up in astrology. It reflects real life, and it reflects hard things like, when loved ones pass away in
Mhm.
pivotal moments of our life, and sometimes those are, Saturn cycles,
Right.
or when we come into really mature positions like becoming a parent.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting how I think I'm a little biased because I'm a day chart, so I think it probably is very different. It plays out differently if you're a night chart.
Yep. Yeah, it does. I'm a night chart with an angular Saturn, in Aries, so I know Saturn very well.
Yes. Yeah, probably not as I feel like with day charts, it's like it's difficult. There's a journey, but ultimately, it's probably for the best or like a very big learning opportunity. And I guess I'm not sure. It's something I want to do more research on.
Mm,
Maybe I'll talk to you later about your night chart, Saturn. Um, but it feels like it would be less beneficial or there isn't maybe like the silver lining or something that happens
yeah,
with
I think day charts with Saturn transits, it's surmountable difficulties, and then night charts, unfortunately, sometimes it's a chronic issue that continues, and maybe it's not as intense after the exact Saturn transit, but it continues, whereas our Mars transits might be far more constructive.
mm,
So that's the nice thing. Mars transits are quicker as well. So yeah, uh, less bruises, more pain.
yeah.
Or no, not more pain, more melancholy for Saturn.
Sure. Yeah, more prolonged, greater malefic transits and versus the Mars transits for day charts being maybe sharper and more like literally painful or or something like that, but they're quick too. So it's not 3 years of like a Saturn transit, which is it's a long time to be having like the greater malefic transiting for you. So
Yeah, and it can be rough. Me personally, I had my closing Saturn square conjunct Pluto. So transiting Saturn was conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, conjunct my IC, and yeah, there is a major loss in the family. There is it was squaring Saturn in my seventh. There was some relationship stuff and learning about astrology, particularly after that year in 2020, was yeah, so illuminating because it took these quite difficult experiences and then I could see that they were lined up in a certain way and this chapter was coming to a close. And I think that's the nice thing about the Stoic nature of faith-based astrology that we find in Hellenistic, that we can see when things are going to get rough, but we can also see when things are going to get better or when the water stills. And I think that's one of the therapeutic values of astrology is being able to see your way through and having a glimpse of the roadmap while also having enough spontaneity to get some surprises along the way. And that's the nice thing because we're rarely looking at the good transits as much as we are the Saturn and Pluto ones.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, the fate conversation. I think about that like all the time. How beautiful it is that astrology speaks to those the difficult things, and also to the good things, um, and that yeah, that there is totally still room for surprises, and that's something I always try to like emphasize for clients in particular is that yes, these are like some of the keywords or some of like the things we can maybe think might happen, but it's not totally set yet. And there's always room for that surprise to come in. And, I think, um, yeah, there's just a million different ways that you can put these ideas of like the planets and the houses and the systems together, and that like the universe is always finding new ways of like combining those, and it never ceases to amaze.
Can I ask you a question? What was when you were early on learning astrology, was there any recent transits or yeah, was there any recent transits or timing techniques that made you think, okay, this is quite accurate?
Yeah, it was also the eclipses for me. I was having eclipses in the ninth and third. Um, and I have like big stellium, the big stellium in the ninth, like my moon, my sun, my Mercury, my Venus, and Pluto, like all together within the first 15 degrees of Scorpio. Um, so those transits were huge, and I was feeling very much, yeah, there was just no denying it. It was like, this is too spot on as far as like exploring the spirituality piece. There were things happening like with siblings at the time, so like the third house, and like I also joined this yoga studio at that time that's like kind of like a very third house place for me. So all of that was kind of happening at the same time that the eclipses were happening, and um yeah, I think that was what kind of got me interested. And then during that time kind of exploring more and like finding out the data piece that tied into like that ninth house Mercury, really kind of blew me away. But
Oh, can I ask what degree your Mercury is at?
um I'm terrible with this. I think it's at 10 degrees and it's retrograde, and then I have Pluto at 9 degrees. um
Okay, cool. I was just wondering, there's a Mercury placement that's like 28 degrees of Scorpio, and
Mhm.
I just keep meeting it in people throughout the
Oh,
past couple of years. So I'm like, okay, good. I haven't met another.
yeah. I'll confirm. But yeah, I think it's all of mine are like with the first 15, the first half of Scorpio. Yeah, 10 degrees retrograde.
Okay, so your Mercury is conjunct my moon.
Oh, okay, interesting. That's cool.
Um, do you find yourself attracted to relationship astrology or synastry?
I am more attracted to the like familial synastry, like between like families, I guess. But yeah.
Okay, so is Mercury ruling your fourth house?
Yeah.
Oh, the astrology of families, of course.
Yeah, totally. Spot on.
Okay, so bringing those house topics of home and family and roots into the philosophical realms of astrology.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so that's why you were curious about the synastry between parents and grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So do you find with your own family major patterns of shared placements or uh, strange aspect patterns that go back generations and generations?
Yeah, yeah. So I haven't gotten to explore much with like my parents or grandparent charts. I've tried to rectify them as best as possible without having a birth time. But even in my own family, so I have 3 kids and a husband to look at our synastry. So that's a pretty good, anecdotal sample size. And it has been so interesting to see like how that plays out and how um like the big three of both my husband and I, like just it's all like it's not a copy paste, but it's like very much informs like the big three of our first 2 kids. And then the third one is kind of like the oddball of the family. But still there's still a lot of overlap when we look at like the modalities and the elements at play. So
Yeah, with the wild card, I would look at your lots to see if there's any
oh yeah.
conjunctions, because sometimes that's where you see interesting synastry. But there is always one person in the family who you're like, where did you come from?
Yeah.
You're so different. Maybe in
Yeah.
terms of chart, but like, yeah, sometimes it's like, okay, you're here to do your own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I say wild card, but like thinking about it, it's like, no, there's a lot still. It's like, so I'm Pisces rising, Libra sun, and a Scorpio moon. My husband is a Sag rising, Scorpio sun, Virgo moon, and then we have 3 kids. The first one's a Libra rising, a Pisces moon, and a Leo sun. She has like a beautiful Leo stellium in the 11th house. And then our middle child he's a Pisces rising within like 2 degrees of my rising, and has a Sag sun and a Leo moon. And then the third one that I said is the oddball, is that he's the Aries he's a Cancer rising. So that's kind of like maybe the oddball placement. But then he is an Aries moon in the 10th house, which is just very loud. And then, but he's also a Virgo sun and Mercury. So he does have like the overlap, and he has a Libra Venus. So there is like, it's not totally an oddball. It's more the Cancer rising, I think, that threw me off. But yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of 10th house stuff going on.
Yeah.
Are they
Yes.
all day charts?
They are the first 2 are day charts, the third is the night chart. So
Okay. So
yeah.
yeah, the nocturnal wild card for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you notice much of a difference between your day chart kids and the night chart?
Yeah, he's definitely a lot more sensitive to certain things. They're all very, they're kids, they're sensitive in so
Uh,
many ways. But the night chart, and just being ruled by the moon, it's like when he is just a little bit sick, or like, what I would say the other kids could probably just power through. He's like a mess. Very very low tolerance for discomfort. So yeah, and he makes it known. But
Oh, for sure, with the Aries moon?
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's gonna be loud.
yeah. Mhm.
Oh, yeah, especially in the 10th house. Yeah,
Mhm.
your emotions are very visible. Um, and what is your experience like of knowing your kids' charts and having that awareness of what they're going through so intimately, more than any parent who's, uniquely attuned to those kids anyway? Does it
Yeah.
add, like, a new layer of understanding that you feel you wouldn't have had before?
Yeah, it definitely does. I do try to have a hands-off approach with it. I don't want to be prescriptive in any way to how they turn out, or I really want them to be their own people and not project anything on them. So I will say I try to be very uh I don't know the word, but hands off on that aspect. But it does definitely help, speaking of the third one, just dealing with temperament, and also I look at like my chart and like the synastry to try to um think about like my role in it, and like looking at hard aspects that the especially the oldest two might have, like with their moon, and like how I might play into future issues. There's so much around uh parenting these days, and like wanting to just in general outside of astrology to like break cycles and like do things in a new way. I think every generation probably has this to some degree. um but there's like this hyper awareness that I have of like not wanting to play out the shadow sides of those aspects that they might have, in particular to their moon. So things like Mars moon things, or
Mm.
Saturn returns, Saturn moon. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. That would be my fear of looking at the chart of my kids, even though that is definitely not a plan I have. But it would be like my greatest fear would be, "Oh, what if I see an evil person I've made? What if that happens?
Yeah. Yeah.
What if it's like, an eclipse conjunct Mars on the ascendant?" I'm like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, you are here to unmake the world, okay."
Yeah. It also teaches us though, right, to like see the beauty in those things. And like I think kids are a really great way to see like the positive aspects of any chart too, and how they can play out if they're like nurtured, or I don't know, allowed to express themselves in a way that's healthy.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess that's the value of being a parent with astrology is knowing exactly, yeah, being able to see, and even if you're not intervening, what qualities are being nurtured
Hmm.
or what is really trying to express itself. And that probably becomes very loud.
Yes.
And I guess the closest thing I have to that is reading somebody's chart who you're not telling them anything about it. I have some friends who aren't into astrology. I know their birthday, so I'm just seeing their transits play out, and they don't know anything about it.
Hmm.
And it's like, I have a friend who has a Venus Jupiter conjunction in Virgo, so complete perfectionist, absolutely tortured artist. But anytime benefics aspect, um, yeah, anytime Jupiter trines that, good things happen to him. So it's like, okay, I'm seeing my son grow.
Hmm.
So that's the closest thing I have to it. So
Yeah.
is there that thing of seeing these pivotal moments in your kids' lives reflected in the chart? Because there is so much developmental stuff we can see in the charts early on.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of like, I guess for me, the ones I've been the most aware of are when there's like an injury or like an illness,
Mm,
and pull the chart up and just know that like Mars is doing something. So yeah, I haven't done too much exploration, I guess, and like I said, I try to be really hands off and not be too prescriptive, but I think I'd spend more time thinking about the possibilities, about what they might be when they grow up, or like what their interests might be when like offering, would you like to sign up for this type of class, or would you like to do this activity, and trying to like suss out like where those little seeds are in them, versus
And
like,
have you ever been surprised by the way the sign placements have manifested in the interest they start to take?
yes and no. I mean, some of it's just so literal, um, and it's interesting because the one with like the Leo stellium is the oldest, so I've had the most experience.
Mm.
But so it's in the 11th house. Her MC is there as well. So it's like this girl is like, in my opinion, is meant for like the stage, or to be in the spotlight somehow. But she also has the 6th house moon, and like there's kind of like an anxiety, or like just different struggles with being seen and not always wanting that. So it's interesting, and it's always evolving. But yeah, so I've been a little surprised that the stellium hasn't won out yet, but I still have an inkling that it might.
Yeah, I know I'm not sure which ones off the top of my head, but there are some decans of Leo that speak to um, really wanting to be in the spotlight and it taking maybe a couple of years to really step into it. And
Mm,
it's just, and I've seen this with comedian friends of mine or other performers who have that. And I
mhm,
know some people with it in the 12th house who always worked adjacent to the entertainment industry or were in background roles. And it took them until their late 30s to really step into it. And then once they're there, they just have this firmness that lets them hold it entirely with integrity. And yeah, I think not to say that's what your kid will do, because I don't
sure.
know the chart, but like there are, yeah, wonderful ways these things play out that are very nuanced instead of, oh, all Leos will be theater kids right away,
Right. Totally. Mhm.
which is the fear. That's the worst thing that could happen.
Right. Tell me more about your interest in synastry. Is that the relationship synastry something that you've been diving into?
Yeah, I have taken quite an interest in it recently, and it's just a nice way to figure out how, yeah, sorry, what was I gonna say there? Yeah, it's interesting to see how the transits are activating your charts together when you meet somebody. Um, I usually think that's pretty profound. Or with other techniques like Davison charts, where it's an exact midpoint of both of your birthdays. Um, that chart is often activated when you meet people. So yeah, I often find with close friendships there is really profound synastry. Like my closest friend, we both have our suns and north nodes conjunct respectively.
Mhm. Wow.
Uh, and we both we met in an improv class, and I think having the north node and the sun together, uh, yeah, meeting in the pursuit of ambition or passion or something we really want to get out of this worldly experience,
Totally.
especially if you have ambitions towards comedy or performing. And yeah, I think somebody, especially meeting somebody, I have the North Node in my Leo 11th house as a Libra rising. So yeah, it's just a person I met in a performance class. It just makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
And then having Sagittarius North Node conjunct somebody's sun, your weird friend who goes and becomes an astrologer.
Yeah. Totally. Do you find yourself collecting people with like similar signatures or like other placements?
Yeah, for a while there, uh, I found in my Virgo perfection year, I met so many people with Virgo placements,
Mm.
and I was doing an astrology podcast where I would interview comedians based on their charts, and they all had placements in the houses that were activated by perfection.
Oh,
I thought
wow.
that was very, very eerie. Um, and as I said earlier, I met a number of people who had Mercury at 28 degrees of Virgo,
Mm-hmm.
Mercury at 28 degrees of Scorpio, I mean.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just gonna let people go off and read Mercury in Scorpio Decan Tree in Austin's book to figure out how those experiences went.
Now that they
Um,
can get it online.
there's a PDF going around. The book's been out of print for 10 years. Yeah. Yeah, do you have a special interest in synastry as well, or is it more so just that interest in the synastry of families?
Yeah, more of the interest in the synastry of families, but it is so funny how I feel like I collect people in certain signs too. Like and people that I knew prior to learning astrology even. It's like all of these like best friends I made from working at nonprofits all turned out to be Pisces risings too. Which is just hilarious in a stereotype kind of way.
That is such a stereotype.
Yeah.
The saviors.
Yeah. But also a lot of people, a lot of really good friends, and my husband included, having major like Virgo placements in the seventh house. So yeah, just attracting mutable people in general, or other Scorpios, but yeah.
And was there ever a time where you were meeting people with like the exact same placement, like by degree? Because that's what I found super creepy was, oh, every year I just meet one of these.
Yeah, I don't know if I've found the exact degrees. I did find out my hairdresser has the same big three as me, which is like the first person I've ever met with the same exact big three. Um, 'Cause yeah,
Okay, so that's your ride or die hairdresser.
yeah, and I've had
Yeah.
her been my hairdresser for like since like 2013 or something crazy. So yeah, it's like that fixed Venus. When you find something that works, you just keep it. but um but yeah, it was really weird doing her chart because it was like doing my own chart, but she's a couple years younger, and we have the same big three, but nothing by degree. We have different birthdays. But yeah, it's weird when you find your chart twin. And yeah, I don't know. Have you found some people that have your exact degrees?
Um, I know a guy who I went to school with who was born on the exact same day, I think in the same hospital. And he used to live right across the road from me as well. So we had like very similar beginnings. And I once asked him what his rising sign was. And he said, I think it's Libra rising. So there's somebody who might have a very similar chart. Um, and that's when the nuances of bounds and decans come in because
Mhm.
there's some similarities, but like there's some major differences
Mhm.
in how our charts manifest. But yeah, it's kind of like all of his Scorpio moon issues are the complete opposite to mine.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I wonder what's going on there, even just in the differences of ascendant.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and how it just goes to show too, like how much, so there is fate, but then there's like this element of chance and like free will, and the environment. There's just so many factors, and then the synastry that that person has with like their caregivers or people shaping their environment.
Mm.
Like, yeah, it's easy to say that it's all going to be the same, but like, no, there's unlimited variables in
Yeah,
play.
it's not all about your natal chart. It's obviously you're so influenced by the people around you because having synastry with people is like having constant transits.
Hmm.
So if you have a caregiver with very like exact transits, either negative or positive, that's going to have uh, such an impact on you. But I find with, as we were speaking about, with synastry between child and parent, I've never seen cases where the synastry isn't really tight
Hmm.
in terms of aspects that aren't like to the degree or so many shared placements,
Yeah. Yeah.
or maybe something with the grandparent where, yeah, there's all these weird things that we hear from uh like old school psychology where people are having the relationship they had with their parents with their kid, and sometimes their kid has similar placements to one of their parents, and it's like, right, this kid's familiar for a reason.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah, so sometimes we give birth to ourselves or we give birth to one of our parents, and then we got to deal with that,
Right. I know. Yep.
and that can be reflected in the chart in interesting ways.
Hmm. Yeah, it is interesting as a parent. I feel like the most frustrating things that come up are probably things that I feel in myself. So, yeah, to see it reflected back at you is always like, why can't you just do this this way or something? And it's like the same feedback that you probably have for yourself too.
Yeah,
But
and that's what happens when we have really tight synastry with other people. It's either poking or mirroring a part of ourselves, and it's that really cliche thing of, everything we don't like about other people is a reflection of ourselves.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's how synastry plays out, of it's really poking out a part of our identity or a part of our lived experience from before that's like, okay, that's what this is bringing up.
Totally. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, when you were asking about the degree synastry, I lied actually. I made a mistake that my husband and I do have like to the degree like our Venus and um sun like going both ways. So his sun is on my Venus and my Venus is on his sun.
oh,
Uh,
that's amazing synastry.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty. When I saw that, that was like, oh my God, that's kind of wild that that's even possible. But
And was it years and years into the relationship that you learned astrology and saw that?
yeah, yeah, I mean, 10 years into it or something, and
Wow.
yeah, like,
And it's
okay.
really profound when you see these things you've had for so long and then you learn astrology. And even just seeing that in the chart, it takes you back in such a way that even though it's a thing that's been a part of your life, it's just seeing it reflected in astrology has such a profound effect. Was that a surprise when you saw it, or were you like, yeah, of course that would be there?
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking to see it, it's like, wow, okay, there's like evidence, like data here, outside of like the anecdotes, but it also made a lot of sense. It's like we both have, so I have an eighth house sun and he has a 12th house sun. But I feel like we've always really understood each other and like seen each other in ways that maybe other people don't. So I
Mm.
think like having that dark house experience on top of then, you know, our sun shining on each other's Venuses and like providing that visibility is like really profound, like really special. And then, being both ruled by Jupiter, like relating in that way and having the shared angles, that really helps as well. But
Yeah, that really sounds like such a combination of being seen and understood and appreciated. God,
mhm.
that's great synastry.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And there's so many people like on Twitter or Astro Twitter, like just I don't know, they'll say like 12th house synastry is bad or just make general statements. And I think there is no set rule for that. And it really all depends on the chart. And kind of like I think you had a recent tweet about being able to do crazy elections when you have kind of an effed up chart to begin with.
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about, and I don't know if I fully believe it. But I'm trying to do stuff on bad elections because I'm thinking if I was to choose to do something at the moment I was born, I would probably waited a few days.
Sure.
Um, as an astrologer. So, uh I think in if you're somebody who's had an unconventional life, there are maybe it might be fine for you to do things at unconventional moments
Hmm.
rather than if somebody is acting, and this is how I view dignities, is acting within convention and how you relate to power structures in society. But if you're somebody who's more marginal or more unconventional in the way that you manifest in the world, maybe it might be fine to do stuff that at inopportune moments for normal people.
Hmm.
And I don't think picking completely terrible elections will do you any good, but people were reporting having good experiences during Mercury retrogrades when they have Mercury retrograde in the chart, or um, people having some more constructive malefic experiences if they already have their malefics fully dignified.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'm a big believer in that sentiment and rooting the elections like in your birth chart too, because just because it's not a great election generally, it might be great for you. Like, this April is like a very April 2024 when we're recording this is like a very crazy month as far as like eclipses and Mars Saturn conjunction, and it's kind of gnarly astro weather, but it's also like, okay, this is when the sun is going to be on my Jupiter like this month. So you know, I want to do something that day that is meaningful to me, and not yeah, like you said, not trying to use the worst possible astral weather to do anything important, but like not letting it stop you either, and finding like the good bits that align with your goal or your chart,
Mm.
um, and leaning
I
into those.
I think that's the most important thing, and I think that's where the sentiment came from of doing things on bad elections is when you first learn astrology and you come across electional, it can really uh, freeze you from acting for months on something if you're waiting for the right time to come along. Because there is never perfect space weather. There is never a good sunny day in space. So you are going to be waiting so long for a moment where every planet is in a good position and nothing's being maltreated.
Hmm.
You're really going to paralyze yourself. And that's what I was thinking with the transits for this month. It's pretty gnarly. And we're
Hmm.
going to see some stuff in world astrology or in world news that is going to be gnarly, but like that doesn't mean all of our personal lives are going to be, equally hellish. Like
Right.
some people had a great time during 2020 with all of the Saturn Pluto stuff because it wasn't hitting their chart, and people had comfortable moments within the pandemic. I don't know how, but
Hmm.
some people did. So, even when the world's upside down, somebody's having a good time. So it's really down to your own chart.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, this month is crunchy.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you feeling it with it being in the first and seventh?
Yeah, I'm having the Aries eclipse maybe like 30 seconds away from my descendant. So it's super personal. And the Libra eclipse was on the ruler of my seventh house. So there's been some interpersonal stuff that I've been having to negotiate. Nothing too bad in a very Libra manner. It's gone fine.
Yeah.
It, that was surprisingly easy because I saw repetitions of the last Libra eclipse happening in certain connections, and yeah, it's so interesting to see, like, even for example, yeah, I made a friend around the first Aries eclipse, and there's been stuff going on within that connection every time there's been eclipses.
Oh.
Uh, it was like the week after that eclipse we met, and it was like, okay, right, that's okay. All the eclipses are going to be about this. Okay. So yeah, sometimes it's annoying when it's like you know which storylines are really being emphasized, and you're like,
Mhm.
why this one?
Yeah. Yeah, especially after you get that first one down and you're like, really? Like we've got 18 months of this. Like every time something happens, it's gonna be, yeah. I definitely feel for you. Those ninth and third eclipses, like while they were very good, they
Mhm.
also like very predictable in a very annoying way by the end of it, where it was like, I'm just ready to be done. Can we go to the next, please?
Yeah. I actually started learning astrology when those eclipses started as well.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
In the ninth and the third. And I only noticed that the other day because I looked at a solar return I had during the Sagittarius eclipse, where the eclipse is in the solar return. It's
Okay.
like it was a couple hours before the solar eclipse in Sagittarius went exact.
Wow.
And that year definitely reflected that.
Yeah.
The Saturn-Jupiter conjunction was also in there as well.
Okay.
So yeah, that was wild.
Yeah. What were the big themes then for you other than the astrology?
Yeah, so the big themes were no, it's kind of heavy. So
Mm.
I had become really ill in the few years before, and I was thinking that that year was so difficult, but so much good came out of it. Where I figured out what I had. It turned out I had had chronic Lyme disease for years undiagnosed.
Oh wow.
So that year I had that diagnosed. So in the solar return chart, the eclipse was in the 12th house. So there was those really strong 12th house significations of long-term chronic illness and obviously being in a pandemic, isolation. Um,
Mhm.
then because Chiron was hitting lots of parts of my chart, it was squaring my Venus around that time. I started writing a show about the myth of Chiron because I was getting into astrology. I discovered that myth, and the myth of Chiron is about a centaur who becomes poisoned by an arrow shot by his friend Heracles. He is immortal, so he can't die, and the poison lasts forever. So he's got this problem that he just cannot escape. And because he's a teacher and a philosopher, he's trying to be really stoic about it, but it's just this ongoing constant pain. And by some happy accident, he gets out of that fate. But I just thought that was something I was really living through of, yeah, getting into astrology, learning more about fate and being more stoic and having these very chironic experiences of finding wisdom in difficult experiences. And yeah, then just deciding to uh, turn that into a stand-up show
That's so,
because, of course,
yeah.
why not?
Yeah, that's so amazing. That's like very difficult. I'm sorry that you've struggled with that, but also how you were able to do that and how literally it speaks to like the transit speaking to your experience, the astrology, but also like the myth. Like that's incredible. I'm a little bit speechless to hear like the backstory on that with the Chiron.
Yeah, so it is coming from like quite a rough background how that came about. And then when I did a week-long run of that show in a festival last year, there was some interesting transits where Chiron was right on my descendant, and uh, and in mundane astrology, Chiron was rising over the eastern horizon, so rising over the ascendant at the beginning of the show every night.
Wow.
So it's just yeah, an insane detail. Nobody yeah, that I couldn't tell anybody about because
Right.
this was a comedy show, and I was trying to kind of bury the lead on the fact I had found this myth through astrology.
Hmm. Wow, that's so amazing. That's just a really beautiful story. I really appreciate you sharing that. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
so wild.
Yeah. Yeah, you really couldn't like you couldn't make this shit up. Like it's just it's crazy. Like there's no end to the synchronicity and like the yeah, alignment. That's wild.
Yeah, and it's moments like that where those are the fun moments where astrology is really loud and it really clicks into place. And then
Mhm.
there's other moments where it's like, I wish I didn't know astrology. I wish I didn't know that there was clear indicators in a set of data that this is happening.
Mhm.
And do
Totally.
you ever find that where when something quote unquote astrologer good happens where it's not necessarily a good experience, but you were able to predict it? Do you have
Oh,
moments like that?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. Like I think last year like the Saturn ingress into Pisces was really loud. There were just very little dumb things that were just annoying.
Mm.
Uh and like I think it was also at the same time that Pluto was going into Aquarius. So um yeah, just I there was I don't even know if I want to share this stupid story, but it's, I was changing the license plates on our van. It was the winter time, so it's like very snowy where I live, and the I had to, every year you have to like renew your registration with the state. So I had to do that. And at this point, for some reason, they sent me new license plates that I needed to replace. So in Minnesota, they use a lot of salt on the roads in the winter. And what that does is corrode all of the metal on the vehicles. So like the screws that hold on the license plates always get like rusted. Um, so I was having a hard time doing this, but it was like the deadline of like the next month where I needed to have the new plates on. And it turned out I couldn't reuse the screws that I had, and I needed to order new ones because they were rusted. And um, so I had to like order these screws online like overnight on Amazon or something. But in the meantime, like I needed to get my kids to daycare so like I could work that day, and also um I can't like do this car thing when I have like a 1-year-old that's like getting into everything. So I was like, okay, I just have to like go take them without this license plate on the back of my car. And like immediately in the 3-minute drive to the daycare, I get pulled over, by the authorities, like literally Saturn coming for me. And nothing major happened. They just gave me a warning, but they thought I was driving like a stolen vehicle or something. And it's like, okay, yeah, Saturn's in the first now, and now I can't take any like little chances that might normally be okay.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the ruler of the 12's coming in the first.
Yeah, yep, totally. And then my husband has Pisces in the fourth, so like right around the same time, we started having like mysterious water leaking in our basement. Um,
Oh, that is was he the person who was having to deal with that the most?
yep, yep.
Yeah. Oh, water damage is such a Saturn and a water sign and the fourth.
Yeah, and like
There's
Pluto
been so
was
much
very
water stuff going on during Saturn and Pisces that it's kind of laughable that we've had all the orca attacks, we've had uh, major incidents involving boats quite recently, and yeah, that's boats and submarines and stuff like that since Saturn ingressed. And yeah, so your husband got that very personally. Where was it a basement that was flooding, or was it just?
Yeah, it took us a long time to figure out what was going on because it would flood like not like a ton of water, but like enough to where we would clean it all up and have to use like the vacuum to like get it up, and just a pain in the ass. And there was no rhyme or reason really, except that it would happen at night. Um because it wasn't all the time, and it was also like a record-breaking level of snow that winter, and it was in March when it was like starting to melt.
Mm.
So we live in like 110-year-old house. It's very common in Minnesota for the basements to get a little damp. And we bought this house like 3 years ago or 4 years ago in 2020. So we just kind of figured like, well, it's time, we had kind of dry winters before this. So it's probably like something with the foundation that we can't really control that we'll have to spend a lot of money to fix now. But eventually we found out that it was just we have a water softener because of all of the minerals and stuff in the water where we live. And that runs at night and like does a cycle, but it's not every night. So we finally were able to figure out that it was actually that was like somehow causing this water to like leak all over. So, and it's not a finished basement. It's not like a living area, and we were able to clean it. So we didn't have like the permanent like damage or anything from it, but it was very annoying and essentially a simple fix, but it took like months to figure out.
Yeah, so mysterious damage at the foundations of the house.
Yeah, and Pluto
Very
being
Saturn and
like
Pisces.
this. Yeah. It was just very, very on the nose, but
Yeah. I wonder what's going to happen to that basement when Saturn and Neptune come together.
yeah, hopefully nothing. We think
Hopefully
that
no ghosts.
yeah. Oh yeah, it could be. No,
I'm joking, but yeah, that's just the first thing that came to mind is what's the next step up from like water damage that's a little bit of a nuisance.
right. Yeah. We'll see how it plays out. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to be here today. Do you want to share with us where we can find out more about your work?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks so much for having me. This was very fun. And yeah, if you'd like to check out any of my stuff, I'm Fionn Cleary Astrology on Instagram. I have a website that is also under the same name, Fionn Cleary Astrology. And you can find out when my books are open there. And yeah, do I have anything to plug? Not right now. There is some stuff coming up in the future where I'm in talks with some other chronically ill and disabled astrologers. We're putting together a little org to maybe put on some conferences and put together some information for people who are practicing while navigating a chronic illness or a disability or having to navigate welfare while being a business owner or something like that. So that's an exciting thing coming up in the future. But yeah, I wish that was already a thing and I could plug it. But yeah, soon.
Yeah. Well, we'll see when this comes out. If it comes out after that, we'll make sure that we get it plugged. So
For
yeah,
sure.
I love your website, by the way. I know that that's like a newer thing for you, so that looks really nice. I just wanted to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the Mercury and Sag energy is really strong to the point where I showed somebody it and they thought, is this a joke?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, this is an Eastern European guy, and he was saying, yeah, if I went to this website and I didn't know you, I just thought I'd book with you and you'd send me an email with like a middle finger emoji. And I was going, it has a little bit of levity to it, but I wouldn't have gone that far.
I don't know if that's a compliment or yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I encourage you all to check it out. And yeah, thanks again. It was really great getting to know you, and yeah, looking forward to speaking again.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well, take care. For more information about Fionn's work, check him out on Twitter at Fionn_Cleary and on Instagram at Fionn Cleary Astrology. Right now his website is down. He's not taking readings at this time while he's focusing on recovering from his illness and prioritizing his health. But you can support Fionn by donating to his GoFundMe, which is still live. He's seeking some expensive treatments and could really use our support for him to make some more progress in his recovery so he can get back to doing his really great work as an astrologer and comedian. For more information about my work, you can find me at By Jove Astro on Instagram, at By Jove Astrology on Twitter, and the best place to find me of all is at my website, byjoveastrology.com.